Okay, my name is Ashish. The topic is fail fast versus fail smart. Uh, a brief background about me, I started my career in LabVIEW in 2005. Some of the folks here know me very well in the sense because they were mentoring me, and that's how I started my career in San Francisco Bay Area. But without going too much into that history, let me get started with this. So the topic today is fail fast versus fail smart. I'll start with the giants are female. I have two of them in my for today. One is we call it Rocket Woman of India. She was her name is Ritu. She was part of the she's part of ISRO, like India Space Research Organization. They are and she had played a big role in the Mars mission. So she's active as a scientist, and that's one. The other one is the Rocket Woman of Ashish. That's my wife. Kritika, I mean, she takes the credit for it. She has been a backbone of my life, and all this story about her failures and going through that process, I can't have enough words for it. All right, so how it all started. In May 2010, I was having a lunch in Passage to India. There is a nice, famous restaurant in Mountain View. The call was from a doctor friend of my dad in India. That they took to tell me that, hey, Ashish, you should fly back home because your dad is not doing well. And he could make it. So that was my start of my journey with my family to move back to India. It was 2011 when I moved back. I took a year to decide after the loss, like what makes sense in terms of priorities and the family and the work and the career. And I realized family was more priority at that phase. And I was like, sure, what could go wrong, right? That's what we say when you write the code too. I was going back home. So 2011, sold off the house in Santa Clara, packed the bags and moved to India. Now let's talk about failures a little bit before we get further. So now in this section, I'm going to take a different take on failures with some examples in the industry, okay? Is it a failure or success? Well, I remember, I know some new generation might not know, but Clippy had been, I mean, everybody knows about it, but nobody used it. Right? So you just close it, right, when you install it. So, but that was a completely functional running product, right? Microsoft had it in there. Now, we call it a failure, maybe the failure from the business aspects point of view, like they couldn't see the use case, but they just had it in the tool, right? But it depends who you ask. Google Plus was a famous, they tried to compete with Facebook on a social networking. I think they tried for like 10 years to get more users, and who could think about Google not able to acquire users for their social networking platform, right? But after 10 years of trial and errors, they failed. Was the technology a failure? I don't know. But it was more of a broader sense. The whole product really failed. It never saw light. Hyperloop. We all engineers, right? I mean, these technologies do really relate, and we are like, without thinking about failure, we just like, okay, Hyperloop, let's go for it. We saw like MIT and a lot of other industries really jumped into it. We saw some successful trials. But it never saw light, huge investment, but still failed, right? Now some other cases, BlackBerry, for example. They did see a success, huge success at the point, but then at a phase, they were really like facing fierce competition by Apple, So BlackBerry had a great technology at that point of the time, but they could not see the competition coming from a different direction. And it was too big of a shift for BlackBerry to even think about moving to that direction, and ultimately caused a failure. But they did taste success. Kodak, I'll say from my perspective, they did not see the digitization or digital technology coming. Although they had time, I guess, but they could not think about. One aspect is they had the technology which was really radical in the sense for them to shift from like analog or films to digital, but unfortunately, that was another example of a failure. This could be a bit debatable. Like, I was talking to my colleagues about, hey, this slide, and they're like, dude, you want to make sure you have good argument about it. I don't have a good argument, but my take is, at, at some point, IC engines were like an industrial revolution, right? They really made this whole industry, mass production, things like that. But now we think about it from a different perspective, right? So it's a different time. As the time changes, some successes might be start looking as a failure too, right? So, so it's a success at that point. Even now, it's a success. There are a lot of improvements, optimizations on the engines. But, environmentalists are kind of, talking about it a lot. We are trying to scramble on how to lower the emissions, bring it, everybody knows the story. But for engineers, it's a success. But for the world, it's a failure. This is another one. I took it from stand-up comedian Don. I really liked it. So I don't know, but at least I related it with a lot. Like, how many times you got success in plugging in the USB the first time? I'm not talking about USB-C, okay? I'm talking about the old ones. All right? So here are the stats he got. So 78% of the times, it's always upside down. Okay? It's only 3% of the time you get it correct. And 19%, you just don't know. You just have to look back and then figure out what we are doing, right? So, but USB is a big success, right? If you think about everyone, like, it really changed the way accessories, the PC peripherals were used. But looking at the stats, you might say that, who designed this, right? To fail 78% of the time. But, so it could have different arguments. What about this? So this you stole my point, man. So this diagram gets floated around as the worst example of how the LabVIEW coding should be done, right? But from my perspective, you see a lot of history, perseverance, dedication, really somebody putting effort to get it to work, right? And how do you know? Does it work? Do you know who is the author? I don't know, right? But I'll say this really shows the lot of efforts that should be not ignored. So I typically don't like to showcase these kind of examples as bad programming practice, but it depends who's your audience, who you're trying to teach to, right? But that's an example. So this is a saying from Thomas Edison. I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work. All right, so coming back to my story. So going back to India in 2011, I launched RO Technologies. Now, and I had an amazing program as you come on board as an alliance partner. They support you. They had this lease program, so you don't have to really spend a lot on licenses. You can lease the license. You have certified team members on board, so really helped a lot. That's how it started in 2011 back in India. So here's a fun story. As an engineer, I was trying to run a business. So I was like, sure, why not? As an engineer, you're like, yeah, you can do everything, right? So we took a project. I realized machine vision was something that was not, the automation in India, at least I have seen it was very much PC-based or a PLC-based automation, like opening, close valves, not time-critical applications. But machine vision was not really as penetrated or as commonly used. So I took that as one of the technologies that I could introduce. So we made this test measurement system or a quality control using machine vision for a seat of a car. So the seat will go through the conveyor line. It's a production line for the seat. And we had these 4 or 5 different cameras taking pictures and understanding. It failed. It failed in the production line so I think that was a learning, like, things work in your lab, but when you put in the floor, right, you realize that, oh shit, it's not your lab is a controlled environment. The lighting, the scope creep, understanding the business aspects of it, like instead of just saying yes to all the questions or the customer needs, you try to listen in, see what the risks are, and coming up with that solution was a big failure. We tried to do something in IoT. We created this IoT device, completely functional product. We had a dashboard that will basically show the data. I made a concept. We made one solution, started showing off. But then technology was great. It was working. But from the business point of view, I realized building a product, especially hardware product, like bill of materials, sourcing, assembly, packaging, installing, support, maintenance, and those things are a totally different ball game. It's not like you cannot do it, but I was not prepared for it. So although we had a functional product, I had to take a call, like I cannot support that as a business aspect. A lot of things we learned, but again, I'll call it a failure. PCB inspection using machine vision, what could go wrong with this? So we made a working solution. Took some samples from different customers, and then demonstrated how this thing can work. But I guess they were more focused on the functional testing, which was solving their purpose. Like, hey, you plug this PCB in your test device, you run the actual test for functionality, and you are able to get all those details which you otherwise have to do through the vision inspection. So although there was good solution, but it was not a fit in the market because these machine vision solutions can be expensive because of the cameras and the lighting and stuff like that. So just for not a market fit, this was a failure. So let's talk a little about fail fast as a term. From my perspective, fail fast is more like just an open loop control system. You know where you want to go or what is your objective, and you basically have some guide rails to basically decide that what are the rules you follow, and you go through the system, and you see the output. If your output is meeting your criteria within the range, it's a success, or if it's a fail, simple. There is no ifs and buts about it. Don't get me wrong, NI ecosystem help fail fast, okay? And what I mean by that is, because of these tools like Vision Assistant, NI Max for using aliases, and then connecting to all the NI hardware, communicating with the devices, USB DAC, MyRio, VI Package Manager, OpenG Toolkit, JKI State Machine, this kind of ecosystem really made sure we could really try something very quick, and and just come to a decision that, hey, is this something we want to pursue further or just abort? So when I say NI ecosystem help fail fast, what I mean by that is it's actually a success because instead of going too far, you were able to take some decisions early on in your life. So slowly we started, being an alliance partner. We were able to showcase our skills in a National Instruments annual event. In India, they used to host an event in Bangalore. It's a one-day event. Now they call it Bangalore, where we could just have a demos. We have audience, so we could interact with NI folks, and a lot of people will come. So those events were good. So we still continued on our experience on vision, because that really was something that not many people did. So we built this system. They call it a pokayoke. It's like a Japanese term for error proofing. So error proofing in the sense you have an assembly line, you have your product going through the inspection system, and if it fails, you do not proceed. You have to make sure you fix this before you let the part go further. So this was like for a cylinder head of a tractor engine. So idea was to just detect the valves. They are a little different inlet and exhaust valves. So you have to make sure they're in the right sequence. We also did similarly pre-dispatch inspection system for a tractor engine. So I guess it's more about, there are 10 or about 50, 60 different components in the engine. Before the dispatch, they want to check if the parts are present or not, like dipstick, the VIN number plate on the engine, stuff like that. We use NI Vision Builder for this solution. So that was a big thing too, because at least because of these two, we were able to at least have 4 or 5 different installations in the leading automotive manufacturer in India. So that worked. Essentially, for those solutions, we got an award from NI. In the NI Days event, they have this engineering impact award for small medium enterprises. So in 2014, we got one award, and in 15, we got another one for these two different solutions. So this really made sense once I realized in 2015 that if you want to increase your success rate, then double your failure rate. So I'll say it's not double, it might be more, but not less. But these kind of sayings from great people really help to make sure that, okay, you're on the right track, you're not doing anything wrong. Now let's switch gears. Let's talk a quick about fail smart. So it's similar to fail fast, but then you are trying to make corrections and iterations as you're learning more about things. Like you have your clear objective, you have some guide rails to go around. You do take the output, measure it back, compare with the expected results, make the corrections. But what the smartness is see how big is the correction. If the correction has to be too big of a shift, then you just stop and call it a fail. That's the smartness you have to have. Because otherwise you'll always keep iterating. If the correction had not been something reasonable, there is no success to it. So one example I have for fail smart was SpaceX. SpaceX did something that I'll say NASA might have taken years to do, because NASA is funded by tax dollars, but SpaceX had funding to afford to lose. This is my understanding. So SpaceX had designed it, launched it, let's see what fails, and make the corrections, try again. And it took some tries, but they did succeed eventually, right? Slack. Does anybody know the story of Slack, in the sense how they started? So they started as this company called Tiny Speck. It's supposed to be a gaming company. And their game called Glitch, I think it failed miserably. So what do? They just do the pivot. They had the skills in place. So Slack was actually their internal communication tool for the team to collaborate on the regular basis. So they basically pivot from the business model to basically commercialize this internal product into what we see now. So that is one example of fail smart. Like you failed on Glitch, but don't try to iterate on it. Try to pivot and then move on. Okay, coming back to my story. 2016, after learnings of 5 years in the industry, knowing what not to do, seeing some success with the awards and some solutions we do, I realized that we need a formal structure for this company. So I made it private limited. That way it will be more organized. It will force me as an engineer to have some more business thoughts to this company. So we converted into private limited. So after this conversion, some lessons learned. I realized that I should be able to say no to the projects. Because at the start, it's like you can do everything, right? No is never an answer. But then as you proceed in the career, you realize sometimes it's good to be able to say no. But what are the criteria against which you can say no? You need some mission, vision, and core values that should be your guiding principle to be able to decide, how to proceed and where to go. So these kind of my ideology started coming in once we started to mature from the learnings. Also, I realized that as an engineer, I had been typically ignorant about these different heads or different roles in the company. Like, engineer, why you need HR, right? But I realized they play a big role. So HR, ops, finance, accounts, engineering, at least those are really high-level big roles, I'll say. I started appreciating after I made private limited and trying to get into those roles. But important aspect was, as Alan was saying earlier during one of the presentations, like it's about mindset. How you, being a small company, thinking about, oh, you're a small company, why you need different heads. It's not necessary that you have to have some individual sitting in those heads. It's just having those roles and then making sure you switch your head, you take a different hat, start thinking from that perspective and contribute to the team. So since my team was small, I had to switch different hats. It could be during recruitment or during tax filing, during some processes to learn. I had to switch different hats. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but that mindset about accepting, appreciating these roles, and taking these roles on your day-to-day basis made a big difference. We started learning that, we should have a little bit more organized process. Thanks. And the SaaS played a big role in that. That way we could fail smart and learn from it. Like now you can get some subscription monthly products that you can just buy the subscription, try it out, and go through it. So nothing wrong with Basecamp and other projects, but then we kind of narrowed down using SaaS products to come to a decision like, okay, Google Workspace, Jira, Bitbucket, standard, nothing rocket science. But these things really, so SaaS as a solution helped us to fail smartly and come to some solutions that we should just internalize. But at the same time, what we discovered was there were no solutions that could fulfill all our requirements. We just had to figure out what is our process and try to learn these tools to make sure it fits in our requirements. Because otherwise, it can be another rabbit hole that you might end up developing your own solutions, and that's not your key expertise, or that's not what you want to do as a business model. 2021, another call from India to USA. But this time it was a happy call. This time it was me calling one of my old friends and a customer in USA about an opportunity. And essentially that call helped me decide to move back to USA. I'm based in San Francisco again. Couple of things made me move was, now why move after 10 years in India? It was more about, after spending 10 years in India, after family had recovered from the loss, I had narrowed down my vision of the company that, your focus is, machine builders in USA. You as a software team, you want to help as a software team to the machine builders. San Francisco was an ideal place for me to be, and that made me move. At the same time, I had been groomed into San Francisco Bay Area work culture, so I was missing all of this, which basically made me make a move. So now we established in 2022, we started a LLC in California. And with the technologies we have in place for remote operations, and at the same time, all these great frameworks are helping us to be able to work remotely, different time zones, have some hardware abstraction to be able to develop the solutions without the hardware. And then, when you are in front of the hardware, you can test it with it. So this framework standardization is really helping many of people like us. I'll say many because not everyone is great in developing these frameworks. And NI and ecosystem, communities like GDevCon coming together to help with this formalizing the frameworks. Educating people about these frameworks is a big thing because that can basically go a long way for many of us. One thing we started internally is just this fail smart approach. How do we internalize it? Like continuous integration. I'll call it a fail smart because you try it, build fails, you then try again, it succeed. Unit testing is another example of fail smart. You do that. I'm not saying that we do it very often or very internalized yet. We are trying to get to that. I'll say it's very difficult to internalize unit testing unless we really have these whole processes around it. Brainstorming is another way for team to be able to encourage the team to try something, fail, and move on. At least you learn from it. Ask for help. That has been one thing that I realized maybe engineers are not good at because they think they can do everything and they don't ask for help. But I'll say, don't be shy, just ask for help. It's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to feel that you don't know everything. But, discussion forums, Slack channels like LabVIEW Mastermind is one I'm part of. I see like whenever I ask questions, you do get replies. And now I'm ready for next set of failures. something like something like scale up, which is a different ball game. I don't know. I don't have any answers or opinions, but that is one big challenge. And retention of the talent is another big one. I think everybody goes through that. I'm trying to work on. So finally, what is Arav? He's my 15-year-old son's name. And he has been one of the big factors for me to keep going, even after failing, just keep going. And I'm just hoping this Arav and that Arav systems will continue with me and even without me in future. Thank you.